Hi there, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Most of what I'll be talking about will come directly from my book, Arctic Odyssey, which I wrote and illustrated upon returning to my home, Dreamer 2, a 42-foot ketch, which I lived on for almost 25 years. And so it began, the long-awaited journey, almost 31 years ago to the day. May 8th, 1995, 9:30 in the morning, George Hone and I slipped Dove 3's mooring lines, and with Winston Bushnell at the helm, slowly motored towards our destiny, traversing the legendary Northwest Passage. One might ask, and a waitress did ask Winston and I while we were having a cup of tea in a restaurant, why we wanted to sail the Northwest Passage. I said, not sure if I was joking at the time, because we're real men. We thrive on hardship and pain. We live for excitement and the chance to face death. And Winston quietly replied, you know, for me, that's almost what it's all about. And maybe it was because of his motto, grab a chance and you won't be sorry for a might have been. Winston built Dove 3 specifically for sailing the passage. She had a steel hull, was only 27 feet long and 6.5 feet wide. She had a drop keel, so it could be raised while sailing through the ice and shallow water along the Arctic coast. She did us proud. Our voyage began at Nanaimo, BC, Canada. When we reached Port Hardy, we waited for a gale to blow out before crossing Queen Charlotte Sound. After leaving Balaclava Island in our wake near the tip of Vancouver Island, we were in open water, large Pacific Ocean swells rushing towards the BC shoreline. Soon made George and I seasick. I wrote, while hugging the porcelain white throne of Madame Toilette, I cooed my innermost thoughts as I lost my innermost content. The Inside Passage, consisting of many islands along the coast of BC, were spectacular, but it pained me to see mountainsides that had been literally scalped bare of trees, and I wondered about the mentality of people who log in such a manner. Also, several gargantuan, gleaming white ocean liners on the way to Alaska passed us. We had hoped to tie up in Butedale, an abandoned fish cannery, and explore the dilapidated buildings, but some Americans had bought the place and wouldn't let us. Although disappointed, when I woke up next morning, after anchoring in the night, the beauty of Bishop Cove greeted us, and bathing in its hot springs was luxurious. We tied Dove to a dock in Prince Rupert, 10 days after leaving Nanaimo. I had been looking forward to reaching the City of Rainbows, since I had traveled there by motorcycle and then by ferry to Haida Gwaii. Luckily it didn't rain, so our short stay was very enjoyable. Our second leg of the voyage was crossing the vast North Pacific Ocean to the Aleutian Islands, and before long we were sailing past Haida Gwaii, which was barely visible in the distance, except for Toe Hill, where I had camped for 10 days. Who would have thought, as I sat on the beach, looking dreamily out toward the Alaskan Panhandle, that one day I would be in a small sailboat, looking back to where I once sat. Before the illusions began rising from the horizon, I remember looking eastward for the longest time. The earth, as I had known it, had completely disappeared. In its place, as far as the eye could see, in every direction, was water. Water and sky. We were at sea for 11 days before reaching False Pass, which has a population of 99 people, including 22 children. We were befriended by a couple of residents, and I had to laugh when their daughter came aboard Dove and said, when I grow up, I'm going to live on a sailboat and have a horse on it too. Our next stop was Dutch Harbor, where we spent 8 days. While there, we met a Finnish couple who had a sauna on their sailboat, and they invited us aboard for a drink. When I began to experience a warm, light-headed sensation, I quickly made an excuse to leave. But no sooner did I stand up, I fainted and fell on my face on the floor. I fainted a second time before George helped me outside, and the cold air instantly revived me. The Aleutians, at one time, belonged to the Russians, and evidence of their presence could still be seen. Like the Holy Ascension Cathedral and the nearby graveyard, both the church and the bishop's house were not in very good condition, and they were being restored. The third leg of our journey was crossing the Bering Sea. Soon, at the mercy of a gale and treacherous waves, Dove slowly drifted towards the Pribilof Islands. The gale blew for 3 days. Between vomiting and not getting hardly any sleep due to the violence, I was glad when we finally reached the lee side of Nunivak Island. As our little boat swayed gently on the hook, I felt like a babe being rocked to sleep in the arms of an angel. It took about a week to safely reach Nome, and as I strolled its dusty streets, I had the impression that it looked like a Wild West town that had somehow been put in the wrong place. Evidence of the long-ago gold rush could still be seen, like an abandoned gold dredge. And believe it or not, people were still panning for gold. The fourth leg of our voyage was from Nome to Barrow, Alaska. And on June 22nd, we sailed by Big Diomede Island, so close to Russia and yet so far. After that, we were in the pack ice, and we had to backtrack to a small island called Shishmaref. The Eskimos living there relied on hunting and fishing, which was evident by the seals and walrus skins that had been pegged out for tanning, and meat was drying on racks. When we crossed the Arctic Circle, we toasted King Neptune, which tradition dictates, with drams of rum for safe passage. Dove was making good time through the Chukchi Sea until the constantly moving pack ice clutched her in its icy fist. Luckily, we were able to break free and tuck into Mariette Inlet. During our very short delays along the way, I often rowed ashore and explored the tundra, and as I was strolling along the beach here, I came across some massive polar bear paw prints in the sand. Boy, did I get the hell out of there! Our next destination was Cape Lisburne, which rises like a monolith out of the icy waters of the Chukchi Sea. We had heard the once active military base was abandoned, but it was anything but. When we arrived, about a dozen American soldiers were stationed there. When the ice began slowly drifting towards the land, Winston ran Dove aground, and we secured her anchor to the shore, where the current of a small stream kept the ice at bay. Our visit was cut short, because strong winds at the summit of the mountains soon funneled down through the valley, and we had to flee. When the wind finally died, we were stopped again by the ice. It seemed like a cat and mouse game now. As soon as we started making any headway, hugging the coast, the ice would close in, and Winston would have to secure an ice hook to a grounded berg before he and I went ashore. With grizzlies on the land and polar bear on the ice, Winston took his 30-30 for protection. It was during one of these times, while trying to see how far the ice was plugged, that I found a Japanese float wedged in the tundra. Eventually we reached Kukparik Pass, one of several entrances into Kasalaguk Lagoon, which was very lucky for us. Not only had the ice blown ashore on the narrow strip of land separating us from the sea, but it was also stacked about 10 to 12 feet high, which most likely would have wrecked Dove and ended our voyage. The fifth leg of our voyage, from Barrow to Tuktoyaktuk in the Northwest Territories, we were hoping the ice would let up. Much of Barrow is like a modern-day small city, except between many of the buildings, dwellings of the Inupiats, which means real or genuine people, could be seen. We met a man and his son who had a skin boat, which he used to hunt walruses, seals, and beluga whales. We visited the museum, Presbyterian Church, and Point Barrow Rescue Station that has the jawbones of a giant bowhead whale erected on the beach. Upon leaving Barrow, we didn't get very far before the ice closed in. And while I was up in the Ratlins, directing Winston through a very narrow lead, Dove came to a sudden halt. If I hadn't been holding on to the mast, I would have been thrown to the deck. Dove had hit a chunk of ice that had been grounded, and a thick portion under the water was covered in sand, which made it impossible to see. I watched George take a header on the deck, and hearing Winston moaning in the cockpit, soon discovered that he had flown head first into the door. Luckily, he wasn't hurt much and had a spare upper dental plate, because a sudden impact had smashed the one he had in his mouth. Finally, the ice magically cleared, and we easily made it to Herschel Island. Herschel Island used to have a whaling station, but is now a place where tourists fly in and visit. While anchored there, we explored the old buildings, log cabin, Inuit ice hut, and later I found a graveyard, the permafrost eventually pushing a coffin to the surface. But to me it was the place of gifts. Because after exploring the little town, a couple of Inuit had left us a feed of Arctic char in the cockpit. Since the boom and bust of the oil industry, it had become mainly a tourist destination. The next leg of our journey is to Yeo Haven, and we're hoping it will be ice-free. However, our next port of call is Cambridge Bay, which is located on Victoria Island. The voyage there was ice-free, but rocks? Rocks were a different story. At the entrance to Cambridge Bay, Dove hit Simpson Rock, but after some powerful engine thrust and a use of a pike pole, we managed to get off. A friend of Winston's took us up in his little airplane to check out the ice conditions that we would soon be facing. From the air, the island looked like Swiss cheese. All the holes filled with water, the color of turquoise. Since we would be staying a while, I decided to explore the immediate area. Not only did I come across Roald Amundson's Maud, first person to sail the Northwest Passage, but I discovered an abandoned missionary church and boat. I also found an Inukshuk, meaning silent messenger. 3 months to the day since leaving Nanaimo, we departed Cambridge Bay. We had high expectations because of the positive clear ice report we received from the Coast Guard, but soon after passing Jenny Lind Island, we reached a solid wall of ice. Backtracking to Jenny Lind Island, we anchored in water that was so clear we could see the anchor lying on the bottom. When I rowed ashore to investigate the abandoned Dewline station, it felt somewhat eerie creeping through the dark, well-preserved buildings. However, the interior of the large parabolic radar dome was anything but dark. We had been really surprised by the wall of ice we had just encountered and discussed the possibility of turning back, because at this point the ice doesn't always leave. However, our next attempt proved lucky, and the ice had disappeared all the way to Yeo Haven, meaning finest little harbor in the world. Being an artist, I was always interested in meeting other artists, and I met Judas Ululak, a sculptor who has much of his work exhibited in galleries around the world. I was amazed when he was more interested in showing me his freezer full of Arctic char, rather than his sculptures made of soapstone and bone. He was such a humble man. The 7th leg and final leg of our voyage is from Yohaven to Pangnirton, located near the lower end of Baffin Island, about 800 to 1100 nautical miles. Shortly after leaving Yohaven, we met up with the Croatian tern, which I later learned circumnavigated the North American continent. Compared to Dove, the sailing vessel was very high-tech and had a large crew. Bellot Strait is noted for its fast-moving, turbulent current, but when we arrived at slack time, we didn't have any problems getting through. However, before too long, we were battling the relentless ice. Upon reaching Lancaster Sound, the ice eventually thinned, but the sea was anything but calm, and it was here that we saw our first enormous iceberg. Because of the stormy weather conditions, we were forced to bypass Pond Inlet and anchored in the placid waters of Albert Harbor. While there, we built a cairn. And in homage to the people who had donated money and gave us encouragement during our presentation at the Nanaimo Boat Show, we buried the guest book that contained their names underneath it, and I can't help wondering, even now, if anyone will ever find it. After backtracking to Pond Inlet to pick up mail and post hours, we anchored near a grounded iceberg. When the iceberg began breaking up, we hurriedly rowed back to Dove and were on our way again. However, while there, I did manage to investigate a huge life-size crucifixion of Christ in an Inuit sod house. Upon entering Davis Strait, the wind really picked up, and soon it was like crossing the Bering Sea, except there were icebergs now. We tucked into Clyde River to ride out the gale, where we met a couple of RCMP officers, and they showed us their jail. Upon departing Clyde River, Dove is encrusted with a thin layer of ice. Winter is fast approaching. Although the storm has ended, the sea is still very lumpy, and dense fog soon arrives. Our intention is to continue sailing the remainder of Baffin Island, down to Labrador. But when the wind picks up, another storm approaching, we head to Pangnirton, meaning the place of many bull caribou. It's where I see the northern lights for the first time. They're bloody amazing. We tried leaving the next day, but as soon as we entered Davis Strait, after being hit by several large waves which rolled over the entire boat, we decided to return. It was just too risky. A preacher from England and his Inuit wife put us up in an apartment during our stay. We had Dove skidded out of the water on a large metal plate and made her shipshape for the winter. I remember as I look back one last time, the little boat that had been my home and haven seemed lonely and forlorn. I felt as if I was abandoning a good and faithful friend. Hard to believe that I sailed the Northwest Passage on one of the smallest sailboats to ever do so. Seems like a dream now. I hope you enjoyed this seafaring tale, and if you are interested in purchasing a soft cover or a limited edition hardcover of Arctic Odyssey, please let me know. Also, please like and subscribe to my channel. Here's to adventure! Peace, eh?